Why Superhero Movies Are Dying, a video essay.
A theme park film, for example, the Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks. That's a different experience, and it's not even. I was saying earlier, it's not cinema; it's something else.
They called me a madman, and what I predicted came to pass.
Superhero films are dying, and I think we all saw it coming after Avengers Endgame came out. Yes, there have been
when, what was it, Marvel Endgame or the Avengers Endgame came out, I was pretty much done with all superhero movies. You know, if a good one came out, like a niche outlier one came out, and everyone's like, "Oh, it's so good," I mean, I'd go watch it or whatever. But like for the most part, it just felt like once Endgame was done, that's like a good bookend on like that era of movie making. I mean, yeah, there are a couple good and bad ones, even like before that like bookend or whatever. But like, I still, for the most part, enjoyed myself as I watched them all.
Diamonds in the rough like Joker and the Batman since then, and there's probably still going to be diamonds in the rough going forward.
Yeah, because for the most part, when you say the word superhero movie, most people, I would imagine, or at least guess, they would think of the Marvel movies, and the Marvel movies tend to be a little more on the funnier side or whatever, family friendly, whereas these examples that he's using is like Batman or the Joker types, the more serious superhero movies or whatever. There's a different vibe to them. It's, you know, it's not as much comedic relief or whatever, and it's supposed to be a more realistic take on that superhero.
But the reasons those two films in particular were so well received and financially successful were because they were unlike literally every other comic book film coming out at the time.
Right.
Superhero films have been reigning supreme in the movie theaters since 2008, but with sheer oversaturation from studios trying their best to capitalize on that superhero craze, it's gotten to the point now where people are just sick and tired of the constant superhero factory line garbage that keeps plaguing theaters and streaming services. Recent box office bombs like Black Adam and Shazam, and even the underperforming Ant-Man Quantumania, have proved that this genre is in a decline. Throw in a healthy dose of social and political issues plaguing superhero films to the point that the escapism aspect of them is gone, and it's honestly no wonder superhero films are constantly seeing poor box office performance and strong critic and audience pushback.
Yeah. A lot of what he is referring to is whenever you, like, he's talking about like all the shows, like the superhero shows or whatever, that weren't well received, and they had like some sort of political agenda that they were trying to push or whatever. And it's like, I'm not trying to watch a show that's trying to, you know, change my mind on some social issue or political thing. I don't care about that. If I did, I wouldn't be watching a superhero movie show, whatever. All right, I'd be like out investigating about said issue and try to, you know, get to the bottom of it or whatever the fuck, you know. Like, there's the thing that you do whenever you watch something called temporary suspension of disbelief, you know, escapism. You know, you just want to sit back, turn your brain off, and just enjoy a good story. But what happened with the shows is the opposite. It wasn't a good story. It felt a little shoehorned with whatever like political issues they were trying to shoehorn in there, and because of that, it takes you out of your immersion. It breaks the immersion or whatever, and it didn't feel good.
Yeah, even the critics are getting sick of the Marvel formula, and I think that speaks volumes. There are just so many reasons as to why this genre is coming to its end, and we're going to dive deep on each and every one of them. This is why superhero movies are dying. So without a shadow of a doubt, oversaturation is one of the biggest killers of this genre.
Yeah.
Now look, movie genres phasing in and out of relevance is completely normal. It's been happening since the inception of film.
Yeah, because essentially every story has already been told in every which way, in every different setting, and them going in on comic books is just the latest version of it.
Western was one of the biggest in terms of pure dominance in the 50s and 60s, and then it phased out.
Yeah.
Much like this superhero genre that has dominated the 2010s and is beginning to phase out. But the frustrating thing about the way superhero films have begun to phase out is that they kind of didn't really need to. There was still a lot of storytelling potential in this little subgenre. And whether or not we say it's dead or not, look, let's be real, studios are going to keep pumping out these films for at least another 5 years at the minimum.
Yeah.
So it's not going anywhere for a while still. It's going to be a slow death. Because it's going to take a while for studios to get the message that audiences are getting sick of the oversaturation and bland factory line storytelling with forced comedy with absolutely zero substance. Now, oversaturation has been one of the key factors in the downfall of superhero films, with several studios trying to get in on that craze, and it's gotten to the point where it's just become a little bit of a joke. It's not just Marvel Studios dominating the release calendar. Sony wants a slice of the pie, DC want a slice of that pie, and even smaller studios try their hand at cashing in on the superhero craze. Now, this was actually working really well for a while. The superhero films we were getting were popular. For the most part, they were actually good because writers were attached that actually had something to say with an ounce of nuance and intelligence. The creative...
Everything rests on the shoulders of the writers. It's not so much about the actors, the directors. They're just, doing what the writers have written down.
Behind those early superhero films were genuinely trying to perfect their craft through the vessel of a superhero film. That's why we got films like The Winter Soldier, The Avengers, Joker, and the list goes on.
Great movies.
But now, these days, the sheer oversaturation of superhero films are plagued by writers that are hell-bent on trying to shove their political views down your throat instead of...
Not just political views, they want a quick buck too.
Actually telling a good story. But we'll touch on the political aspect of things a little later in the video, because you can't touch on this subject without diving into it. Now, from 2008 to 2019, the superhero genre was in its prime period, its golden days. Yeah, there was a slight oversaturation in that time period, but the movies we were getting were mostly good, especially in the MCU. DC had their misfires, but the problem eventually was...
Yeah, DC, in the beginning, there were a lot of Marvel movies coming out, building up to the Avengers, and then what DC tried to do is, try to hurry up their stuff with, the Justice League, without any, single movies of, each superhero leading up to Justice League. They're just here's the Justice League, instead of, each superhero having their own movie. So...
superhero films just peaked out in 2019. That's when the natural decline started. Walking out of Avengers Endgame, admit it, you thought to yourself, where do we go from here? How do the stakes get higher than that? We were all thinking it. Let's be dead honest. Well, I think Marvel should have maybe taken that into consideration instead of going full steam ahead and bumping up the content machine.
So essentially, where do we go from here is Thanos, snapping half the galaxy out of existence, or was it half the galaxy or half the universe? I don't remember. That alone is hard to communicate on film. And what had happened is on Earth, the movie essentially showed like half the population just dusting away into nothingness, and the other half oh my god, we're still here, we're witnessing it all. There wasn't really a lot of communication on what happened on other planets and other galaxies, because you as a human on Earth, you just don't give a fuck about all that stuff that happened elsewhere, because you're so many degrees of disconnection. And for them to try to take a next step and be like, ooh, what's the bigger bad guy, the bigger next bad guy that's even more powerful than Thanos? Because in the comic books, there are more powerful people than Thanos, or with the glove or whatever. It's hard to communicate that level of power on a movie screen.
Now, to be honest, one of the biggest factors that has killed the superhero genre is Disney Plus. I will die on that hill. Disney Plus has absolutely ruined the MCU, and the MCU is the barometer of superhero movies. There was already an oversaturation of superhero films in theaters, but Disney Plus just made it so so much worse.
Oh boy.
With big and small MCU shows continuing or not continuing on the story of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, it's actually very generous saying that it's a story because, let's be honest, Phase 4, it had no story. But it got to the point where
I'm not even familiar what phase starts and stops, to be honest.
the oversaturation was that over the top that keeping up with the MCU had just become impossible and the fatigue set in. Now, yeah, it probably didn't help that all the MCU shows have been pretty dog shit, which, you know, again, really hasn't helped anything.
Yeah.
But to be fair, there have been good superhero TV shows that have added to this oversaturation as well. The Boys and Peacemaker being prime example.
Oh yeah, The Boys and Peacemaker were good because I don't want to say this, but it's because I think weren't these like rated R shows or whatever? They dealt with adult themes that weren't really dealt with in the Marvel movies. I mean, yeah, the DC ones like Batman and Joker, they were more adult like, but like, and I think there's a couple episodes in The Boys where they're making a lot of like sex references or whatever. There's like an orgy episode, which you can't really have like kids, you know, being exposed to that type of thing. The Boys was something for like adults. Yeah.
Both of those two shows are actually good, especially The Boys. But the reason I think The Boys is such a great show is because it takes the piss out of superheroes more than it actually relishes in being a superhero show.
Yeah.
Not to mention it's a show that pokes fun at the ridiculous political landscape that we now find ourselves in, and it does it with a touch of class, with smart writers, just taking the piss out of the world we live in.
Again, it's on the writers to do good writing. Just make a good story. That's it. It's that simple.
And it's fucking glorious. A superhero show that I genuinely love legitimately helped me realize how much I hate superhero media. Like, it's just wild how meta that show is and just breaks away from the formula of everything else in the superhero genre. The Boys is just so good. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, there is way too much superhero shit plaguing our screens, and it's gotten to the point that pretty much everybody is sick and tired of it. And you know what?
Yep.
It's about time. It's reflecting in the box office numbers. Shazam and Black Adam bombed hard at the box office. Morbius was a masterpiece and earned $3 billion, so that doesn't deserve to be in the conversation. And Ant-Man Quantumania has proved that even the mighty MCU is starting to fall. We all knew that it was falling artistically. It has been for a few years now, but now the box office is catching on as well.
So a lot of these, like, I don't know, modern superhero movie shows or not maybe shows. Well, some shows and some of these movies I just haven't even seen because I'm just not interested in them.
Now, in terms of oversaturation going forward from here, we've still got Guardians of the Galaxy 3 dropping in about a week or two, which, to be honest, if that film is another MCU dud, then the MCU, for me, it's done. If it's successful, on the other hand, which I actually kind of hope that it is, like, I don't think I'm trying to just beat these into the ground here, then it could very well be one of those diamonds in the rough on the decline as we were talking about earlier. We've also got the Flash movie coming out later this year, provided Ezra Miller doesn't try and kill someone or something. And we've also got the Marvels toward the end of the year. Boy, I can't wait for that one.
Oh boy.
I can't even joke. It's not looking good, guys. Now, the superhero formula worked like a well-oiled machine for over a decade.
Yeah.
Introduce the hero, introduce the evil version of the hero, have someone close to the protagonist die, throw a romance in there, sprinkle some comedy in, big action climax, the protagonist wins, and then post-credit scene. That's the superhero formula.
Yeah. I remember so many times going to the theaters when like these early Marvel movies came out. It's like I would go with my friends. I'm like, is there something after the credits? Is there something after the credits? Because there's like, you know, there's after the animated credit scene, and then there's the after the credits scene. So I would always be asking that, like, oh, like look it up on Google, and then it would be like, oh yeah, stay after the credits. There's some good shit there or whatever. So that was fun.
That's the Marvel formula. and it's spread like wildfire beyond the MCU, and people are just sick of it now. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
It worked for a long time, and it worked across the
If it ain't broke, don't fix it until it gets stale.
MCU and other studios as well. It also missed the mark a few times along the way in the process, let's be honest.
Yep.
But for the most part, the superhero formula was just a license to print money. The problem is, people are just tired of that formula. If superheroes are going to get back on top again, this formula needs to evolve. Why do you think the Batman was so successful? Why do you think Joker was so successful?
Because they didn't use the standard formula. They did something else.
Because those films broke the dying superhero formula. The safe storytelling, the jokes for the sake of jokes, the overproduced CGI fest with zero substance garbage that we just become accustomed to. Joker and the Batman went completely against it. Look, nobody wants to see the protagonist go up against the evil version of themselves. That's boring. We've seen it 1,000 times. We don't need to see it again. Transcend the genre. But the problem is, we can't do that because the people writing 99% of superhero films today barely have a creative bone in their body, and if they do, they're hampered by studio pressure or hampered by the restrictions of a cinematic universe where things have to line up.
Yep.
So it feels like superhero films are stuck in this circle of self-destruction. Look, we all know money talks, and the fact that the money is slowing down for the superhero genre across all studios, it's going to force change eventually. Bad critic scores, low audience scores, they don't matter. If it's still making money, they'll never change anything.
Yep.
But the money is...
The only thing you can essentially do is just not go to the theaters. If you're not interested, then just don't go, you know? That's all. But, you know, if you're like some sort of influencer or whatever, and like that's your job, it's like you have to go or whatever. I gotta go 2-3 times to just get a good grip on the movie, to get a good review, whatever. I mean, you know, you gotta do what you gotta do. But I don't know.
starting to go down, and it is becoming a trend. That is going to force change for these studios. They're going to have to evolve that formula. Audience pushback is one of the biggest examples of why superhero movies are dying. And you know what? You love to see it. We're finally at a point where audiences have just had enough of the factory line formulaic garbage that continues to plague our theaters and streaming services. And a large portion of this pushback is due to the rise in identity politics being shoehorned into every single film and show with a superhero label on it. Superhero movies, they're the biggest mouthpiece for films in the modern day. It's sad, but they just are. So what does that mean? It means every single project has to be some form of political statement. We can't have a film or show that is just a good story. That's it.
Yeah, I just want a good story, man. Just make the story good. I don't care what is the most current pressing topic on the United States, on this other country, on that other country, on what's happening in this state, what's happening in that state. I don't care. Just make a good story. Please.
You know, like the good old days where writers wrote stories because they actually wanted to tell a good story. Like that used to be the most important thing. But now we have underqualified writers hellbent on condemning the majority of their target audience just for existing, with overcooked, out-of-touch political statements that completely overshadow the story that they actually are trying to tell. The rise of identity politics at the expense of storytelling is completely destroying the reasons that audiences turn up to watch these films in the first place. And one of those reasons is escapism. It's pretty hard to escape to these fascinating worlds when you're being beaten over the head with these very real-life messages every 5 seconds. Not everything needs to be a political statement. Now, does social commentary have a place in film? Absolutely. Some of the best films of all time are very heavy-handed with social commentary. But the thing is, not everything needs to be a reminder that girls can do it too.
Yeah, this is not really an issue, but it's like, it's been happening in a lot of like recent, I don't know, Marvel movies, Marvel shows, where the female main character is more or less like some Mary Sue type, and she's just good out of nowhere, and that's that. She'll go through like the episode to episode adventure, and then that's it. I mean, he's using She-Hulk in a lot of these examples. In a good chunk of this whole video, he's using She-Hulk. I mean, understandably. It's like the things that make, I don't know, the things that make male characters good is not like because they're male. The things that make the old male, I don't know, main characters good is because they went through a lot of shit, and then they were mostly failures doing that thing on their like climb up or whatever. And then it's some random climax, like peak point in the movie or show or whatever. They're like, you have to be a loser, nobody person before you're like a winner. All right, 99% of the time you're a loser. You know, you can have like your training montages, your whatevers, your points that are showing like you're weak, you doubt yourself, whatever. And then it's that one point that you triumph over something, you overcome something. There's like some action, some scene, and then, oh my God, you did it. You broke through. Great. It's that type of formula, but that type of formula, I'm not even sure if that's like stale, you know? So I don't know. I want to see what else he's got to say.
And that men are evil. Like, we get it. We got it the first 5,000 times. Like, can we just enjoy a good story? Have a bit of fun? No, we can't do that anymore. Like, there is undoubtedly a transition going on right now where people are getting really sick and tired of heavy-handed politics ruining the stories of superhero films. Like, this is coming from me out of anyone. Someone who just doesn't care about politics. In the wise words of Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm not brave enough for politics. And I'm just out here trying to enjoy a fun superhero flick, and I'm being belted over the head for just existing. Like, damn, can't I just enjoy the damn movie? So the audience pushback because of the continuous identity politics, it's a very real thing because it's starting to bother people who aren't politically minded at all. And honestly, I'd be disingenuous to make this video without touching on it. I don't like talking about this stuff. But the sad thing is, you can't not talk about it because it's such a big factor in why superhero films are starting to decline. It's a very real thing, and it is starting to get a really strong pushback from general audiences, and it is eventually going to bring on change. But this of course goes beyond just politics and all of that. Modern audiences are very hard to please. The standards have gone up for blockbuster entertainment.
And that's really hard when you're talking about entertainment, something like, you know, so subjective as entertainment. You know, what's entertaining to one person may not be entertaining to another person. You know, is this this person's first time seeing a superhero movie, or is this like this person's like 36th superhero movie? You know, they're tired of seeing the same old formula, blah blah blah. You know, who are and the movie is trying to make something, a story that can bring both of these people together to have like a good time. And that's really hard.
We live in a time where there are armchair experts in every corner of the internet. Like me, I'm one of them, guilty as charged. 3 years of film school and I think I'm Roger Ebert. But general audiences just have higher expectations. And when they're not met, the negativity cranks up to 11. The discourse online when a superhero film doesn't hit its benchmarks these days eclipses the discourse that we saw when a superhero film did the same thing a decade ago. Like Thor: The Dark World came out in 2013 or whatever it was, and everyone just said, okay, it sucked, whatever, move on. If that film got released in 2023, the world would set on fire. My point is, audiences have higher standards now, and they're less inclined to just let things go. And it's contributing to the pushback on the studios. Again, it is eventually going to force change. So to bring this one all home, the oversaturation of superhero films is one of the major factors in why this superhero genre is dying.
Yeah.
As well as the stale formula that made these films successful in the first place. On top of that, the heavy-handed politics plaguing basically every single superhero film or show that hits our screens, the superhero craze that...
Too much of the same thing and inserting your politics in my movie. I just want to see a good story. That's all.
That has run rabid since 2008 looks like it's absolutely coming to an end. With box office bomb after box office bomb, audiences are starting to speak with their wallets. And as we all know, money is the only way studios make change. Superhero movies are absolutely undoubtedly dying, but it is going to be a slow death. Or are we going to be optimistic about this and say there could be a diamond in the rough that can restore this genre to its former glory? Either way, we are going to find out very soon.
You know, yeah, definitely.
Theme park film.
This was a good video, you know? I'm hoping superhero movies get better. I want to see them get better, you know? The only reason I'm tired of them is because it's like more of the same, like he said. And before I even see the movie, how many like political ideas are going to be in it? You know, am I going to get beaten over the head with like whatever issue that the writers have with society or whatever? It's like, do I even want to go and like chance it? Or do I want to wait a week or two, you know, watch the reviews, see if they're like, is it like worth going? Is it worth the theater experience? You know, if it is, great. You know, I'm down to see another good superhero movie in theaters because, you know, the theater experience is like, you know, I don't have a theater in my house. You know, I'm not fucking surrounded by like 200 speakers, like waiting to jiggle my fucking ass off or whatever when like the bass and the ship comes in scene or whatever. I don't got that at home. I'd love to go see that shit in the theaters, but make me want to go see it in theaters. That's all. Okay, that's enough of my bullshitting. All right, good video, man. I want to see more. 100%. That's about it. All right.